Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Speech of the Week. My name is Mary Hartman, and I'm Director of Education at Bard on the Beach Shakespeare Festival. Oh, we all know how strange it is to gather in this unusual virtual space. But as we do, I would like to invite you to take a moment, wherever you are, to appreciate where you are and to acknowledge the history, culture, and spirit of that place. We at Bard on the Beach are on lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and we are grateful to be here, and we are grateful for the opportunity to gather with you. We have a new feature this week, live captioning. You can access this on your screen if you look for the CC at the bottom on the right-hand side. Click on that and you can select Show Subtitle. Speech of the Week is brought to you by Bard Education, and our mission is to inspire community through dynamic, engaging experiences of Shakespeare. I'd like to thank Katie Johnstone, Melanie Heepler, Ria Schroff, and the rest of the administrative team at Bard on the Beach for helping to make this possible. I'd also like to thank the sponsor of Speech of the Week, Blue Shore Financial, for their generous support. Now I'm thrilled to introduce this week's special guest artist. Scott Bellis is no stranger to our patrons at Bard on the Beach. He is an actor, director, and an acting instructor. He was raised on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam people in what is now known as Richmond, BC. He studied theater arts at Studio 58, Langara College, and has worked in theaters across Canada and occasionally in the United States since 1987. Scott was a member of the original 1990 company at Bard. He appeared in the first Midsummer Night's Dream as a mechanical, and he has played roles such as Hamlet, Petruchio, Brutus, Henry V, Bottom, Master Ford, and Lear's Fool in over 45 productions. He has directed plays for Studio 58, Carousel Theatre, Persephone Theatre, Solo Collective, the Arts Club Theatre, and for Bard on the Beach. He has directed Antony and Cleopatra, The Comedy of Errors, and Two Gentlemen of Verona. Scott is the recipient of 5 Jesse Richardson Awards, including 1 for directing. He has taught acting at Studio 58, and he's the co-founder of the Arts Club Theatre's annual Actors Intensive. Scott is also currently serving as the Council President of Canadian Actors Equity Association. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's great to connect with, have a chance to connect with the Bard community, and it's great to be able to work on some Shakespeare, something that I haven't had a chance to do really this year, apart from preparing for the 2020 season, which unfortunately had to go by the wayside, but we were in full gear up till about April 9th, I think. So it's a real treat to be able to be here and take a look at some of this great text and connect with the Bard community. So thank you, Mary. Thank you for that great introduction.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. I just want to let people know a little bit about what they can expect from today,
sure, and
then we'll dive in. So this is a webinar format, so we don't get to see your faces, and that is hard for us, I have to confess. The interactive experience for Speech of the Week happens next week in our working session. So if you have not yet registered for the working session, you can do so exactly where you registered for the webinar on our webpage. During this webinar session, Scott and I are going to have a conversation, but we welcome your questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, use that Q&A function. We'll save time at the end for questions, but you can send them anytime during our conversation, and we will look for opportunities to address them. So Scott,
yes,
every actor's process is so individual. Can you share a bit about yours? How do you start when you're approaching a Shakespeare speech for the first time?
Wow, there's a few things I do. The first thing, I have to figure out what it all means. And you're all sent, I think, this great document which kind of outlines, breaks down the speech and attempts to apply some meaning to the words, because as we all know, Shakespeare's language was 400 years younger than the English we use today. So it's context, and it's, it's all a little different. So once I understand or have a sense of the meaning of the language, then I kind of look at what the speech is there for. Why is this person speaking for this length of time? Because the fact is, we don't generally speak in chunks this big unless we are in fact giving a speech, which this character, for lack of a better word for the chorus, is doing. But that's the basic gist, is you have to figure out what the speech is for. What are the words attempting to convey? What are they attempting to achieve in the listener? Whether the listener is another character in the scene, or whether the listener is, in this case, the general audience. And you look at things like what's motivating the character, what's the character trying to attain in the story. So that's one of the first things you're trying to ascertain when you're reading through it, and you're trying to get a handle on what's the track of it, what's going to send you through, what's going to carry you forward. Now I just mentioned the word character a moment ago. What's the character going for? Well, in the case of the chorus in Henry V, the chorus isn't really a character. I mean, the chorus doesn't have a name besides chorus. He doesn't have a station or a title. We don't know who they are, what they look like, where they're from. It's a person who's come out for a very specific purpose, and that is to set the scene for the audience and set the tone for the start of the play and invite you into that story. So that's the goal. So that part is actually quite clear off the top. So there's the first couple of steps, right? What am I saying, and why am I saying it? And then after that, I start to break down the sections of the speech so that I can figure out how it's constructed and what are the different tools being employed to help convey the message that I think the speech contains.
What are some examples of tools that you see in different kinds of speech?
Okay. Well, let's start right at the top. Okay. First of all, let's look at the very first phrase. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the word oh, because I always find it interesting when Shakespeare uses the word oh, because Shakespeare, as we all know, did not really have a problem conveying specifics, right? Like, his language is very evocative, at times very complex and very specific to its intention. So when you use a word like oh, which really is a word that encompasses that which cannot be put into language otherwise, I always find it very interesting when I see it, because it's an invitation for a vocalization that has no real specific meaning. It is open. It's a generalized sound. So when we say oh, what do we mean? And if I ask you to think about the times in your day, and there are probably several of them every day, where you vocalize but you don't say an actual word in the English language or whatever language that you happen to use on a regular basis, that's what that oh represents. It represents that noise that we make when we can't put that thought or that immediate feeling into language, into a specific word. So, oh, for a muse of fire. Well, when we say oh, what are we talking about? We're talking about there's something I want to express that I can't contain, that I can't put into language. So, oh, for a muse of fire is different from just saying for a muse of fire. Oh, for a muse of fire. It's to me, it speaks of desire. It speaks of wishing for something, right? So that's a great clue, right? Because it gives me a sense of what is to follow. What is the tone or the need that is embedded in the text? Oh, for a muse of fire. What does that mean? It means I wish for a muse of fire. I'm hoping for a muse of fire. I am calling upon a muse of fire that would ascend.
I also love that it's a muse of fire.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there were muses. There were muses
Yeah.
in ancient Greece, and they had different functions with different, what's the word? Different disciplines.
Yeah.
But it's like none of those are going to fit the bill.
I mean, I think like fire is an image that is associated with war, and this is a play about war. It is also an image that I associate with the forging of something, like the forging of metal, which is what this chorus is about to do. Is they're about to forge a bunch of images that they're going to put out to the audience about what this play is, where it's going to take us. So maybe that's why it's a muse of fire as opposed to a muse of air. Over a muse of air.
It's not really going to cut
work.
it on this
It
one.
wouldn't really
or
work the same
or
way.
Earth.
Yeah. Oh, for a muse of fire. So the first couple of phrases really are all about I wish for something, or I'm calling for something, or I need something. A muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, the very height of imagination and creation, is what they're calling for, right? A kingdom for a stage, more space, princes to act, the highest level of human beings to act out the story, and monarchs to behold the swelling sea. And I find this really interesting because he calls actors princes, but he calls the audience monarchs. He actually places the audience above the actors with this image, right? So those are the first four lines. That's the first chunk. That's your first chunk, right? Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. That's you folks. Then, once we've got that, he's saying, then will this next thing happen. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars. So this is what would happen. This is what the next section is about, right? This is what will happen if we could get this inspiration. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, right? The port of Mars. Well, first of all, the warlike Harry, well, we know who we're talking about. The play's called Henry V. Like himself is a really interesting phrase, I find, because you don't really need it, but he puts it in there. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, which kind of means to my mind, like as he would, or in his own person, according to his true nature, assume the port of Mars. He would take on the shape and bearing of Mars, the god of war. And at his heels, like following close behind him, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. So there's the first couple of sections, right? Wishing for something, and once we've got that something, describing what would happen. Now we get into the next, really this is section 2, the apology. But pardon, gentles. Should I keep going?
Yeah,
I'm
having a great time.
All right, okay, so this is the next section, but pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Sorry, everybody. Please forgive us. We're not worthy. And neither is our stage, our little theater. Pardon us for daring to take on this amazing story. And there's a couple of questions thrown in there.
Can I interrupt
yeah,
for
go
a
ahead.
moment?
I'm
fascinated by this apology and this humility.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many different approaches that an actor or a production can take with it in terms of the sincerity of it. And I'm just fascinated by what the different places on that spectrum can reflect and what experience we could have. So I would welcome your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good way of jumping into one of the things I wanted to talk about was most drama at the time did have a prologue, right? Which would be an actor would come out and say, Well, Romeo and Juliet is a great example, right? Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Okay, so that one is quite neutral. That chorus is very, very neutral. That prologue's very neutral. A guy comes out and says, here are the basic bones of this story. And there may be a lesson in this story. And at the end, there is a kind of invitation and an apology, or we hope you like it, right? And I think what Shakespeare was doing with this particular introduction, or this particular prologue, is he was kind of playing with the form a little bit, because it is quite personal. It's not like it's not in the neutral voice. The prologue to Romeo and Juliet is in a very neutral voice. This one is not. It's quite active and it's quite personal. So in terms of the apology, is it sincere? Well, I think there are individual choices to be made about about the tone and the intention behind the words, right? And that's what we spend our time in rehearsal doing. So you bring up a really, really good point, Mary, because when I see that there's an apology in here, I do have a choice to make about whether it's sincere or whether there's something else behind it. So I might, as an actor, I might go through the speech a couple of different ways with a couple of different intentions or tones in mind for it. And I would bring those to rehearsal and I would try them a couple of different ways and get some feedback from the director. And then eventually we would settle on a choice, or not. Maybe I would do it different every night. I've been known to do that on occasion too.
That's one of the most exciting things about being an actor in a theater, isn't it? Every night is a different night.
Yeah. Immediacy is an integral part of live performance. And if you're doing the show exactly by the book the same way every night, you're not really giving you're robbing the audience of something important, essential, and quite magical, which is what's happening now between me and the audience today. So it's good that
if we could, Scott, I'd love to just answer one of these questions.
Oh, sure. Let's get some questions in. I've been talking for a few minutes. Yeah.
That we have your perspective as an actor and director. So do you think Henry V loses something if a production cuts the chorus?
Well, there's a number of chorus speeches throughout the play. And they are incredibly helpful for providing context for the scenes that follow. So I think the short answer is, yeah, I think you do lose something if you cut them. I think you could edit them down, but I think they are pretty necessary. They just provide, they're like the opening, they're like the narrator in the story. They're very integral in this play. In Romeo and Juliet, you have a prologue at the beginning, and then I think they show up one more time within the play, and that one always gets cut. So clearly it's not generally deemed to be essential to have that second chorus speech in Romeo and Juliet. But here they really jump us around. They start us off here. At the end, when they decide they need to go to war, the chorus comes in and says, now, everybody's getting ready and all this kind of stuff's going to happen. And then there's this thing that Henry's going to have to deal with. So yeah, I think you could do it without them, but you'd have some work to do as a director and as a company of actors to try and create the context.
There's such a direct relationship that the chorus has with the audience too. I mean, there's even, things like follow, real active language and that happens.
Yeah, you lose that connection with the audience, I think, and that connection with the audience is really, really important. And they're so well written. That's the other thing. They're so, like, this one is good, but I love the one, about
now entertain conjecture.
Yeah, now entertain conjecture of a time.
Creeping murmur and the pouring dark fills the wide vessel of the universe. I love that one. Wonderful. So here's another question. There's a strange tradition that Shakespeare knew Little Greek. That actually comes from Ben Jonson, actually, but must have known some of the great classical tragedies. Is Shakespeare's use of the chorus throughout Henry V in any way connected to Greek drama? Because of course Greek drama had the chorus, and the voice of the community. What do you think about that, Scott?
Yeah, well, in Greek drama, the chorus is meant to represent the general population, the community, right? And I don't know that Shakespeare used the chorus in quite the same way. There's no sense for me in any of the choruses that that they are meant to represent the people. They're more likely to represent the all-seeing eye that's watching the play from a same vantage point as the audience, but they know more about the play, and they know more about the world of the play than the audience does. So I think he probably, I think the idea of a chorus, yes, probably came from the Greeks, but I think Shakespeare probably used it in a slightly different way. Yeah.
As a director, what do you see as the advantages and disadvantages of having a single voice as the chorus or multiple voices?
Well, I think again, I think it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the tone of the speech. Like I've seen. Well, take a look at the Romeo and Juliet, the one we did in 2016 at Bard. Everybody spoke. Mm-hmm. The chorus at the top of the play. The entire company came out and spoke it, and I thought that was a really neat idea. I think you can do that with this one too, if you can get all of the actors to kind of share the same headspace and the same tone, right, or the same intention, or something like that. Or I don't know, maybe you could change it up and make them differently, but it has to be personal to each actor, because it's a personal, it has a very personal feeling behind it. You know, I really feel like I'm listening to a storyteller, right? I feel like I'm listening to somebody relate the bones of the story to me from their own perspective. Whereas in Romeo and Juliet, it feels much more neutral. So yeah, I think you can divide it up, and I don't think you lose anything from that. When you share the chorus around, you're saying that we all own this story. When you assign it to one person, you're saying one person has their eye on the whole story. So it just depends on the message you want to deliver to the audience about that.
Let's talk more about the features in the speech. You talked about imagery for a moment when you were talking about the muse of fire and this great forge of imagery. I love that image.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at some of that.
Okay, so here we go.
Do I actually have? Can I ask an attendee question, and then we can go on from there? Wondering if the imagery in the first few lines that refer to the art of the playwright, how tempted are you to have the chorus be a character like Shakespeare?
Oh, that's such a sharp question. I love it. Well, it might not, or maybe it will surprise you, but it may not surprise you to learn that when the first time we did Henry V at Bard on the Beach was in 2003, and I was fortunate enough to tackle the role of Henry. And the chorus was played by our very own artistic director, Christopher Gaze. And while we were all dressed in clothing and armor from the 1400s, he was dressed in Elizabethan clothing, basically representing the spirit of Shakespeare. And I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah. So I think that the chorus, the chorus represents the kind of the will and the spirit of Shakespeare. Shakespeare is commenting on that thing that we often talk about in the theater is lack of resources. We're going to take a few swords and we're going to bash them together. We're going to try and make you believe that we are reenacting the Battle of Agincourt, which had like thousands and thousands of people on either side. And what I love about this speech is it's a real acknowledgement of the beauty of theater, of theater as an arena for the imagination, and it also makes reference to the lack of production values that that we're often having to deal with. I'm sure he would have loved to have like more actors in the show, but then people cost money and extra costumes cost money and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of does both things. I mean, its appeal to the imagination of the audience, I just find one of the most beautiful things in the play. Is it really brings home.
Makes it explicit that this is a collaboration.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
together.
Says theater is a group collaboration. It is a social contract where everybody in the room says, we're going to put our minds here into this imaginary place for a limited period of time in order to appreciate the ideas and the emotions that are embedded in this particular story. And that's what this does here when it says, I'm just going to go a little farther down. May we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt. That's a reference to the big helmets that all the knights used to wear, right? That did affright the air at Agincourt. Oh, pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, which is a rather obscure reference to, could be a couple of different things. Could be one slightly built actor is going to stand in place of an army. But I've also read another thing I found the other day where it said a crooked figure is a little symbol written on a piece of paper. That in accounting, a little bunch of little zeros can stand for millions of whatever. Well, similarly, we're going to do the same thing and let us ciphers to this great account, or zeros in this great account.
Yeah, and if you think about it with any number, if you add a zero to the end of it, you've
all of a sudden you have 10 times
multiplied
the
it
amount.
by 10. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. That's quite key. That's really saying, please fill in the blanks with your imagination, right? Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts, divide one man and make imaginary puissance, right? Puissance is, military might, ability, action, right? So it's saying, take one guy, divide him into 1,000, and there's your army. Think when we talk of horses that you see them printing their proud hooves in the receiving earth. I love that image. I just love the image that he's picked, because it doesn't say, see the horses neighing in their armor or galloping across the fields. It goes very, very specific. It's almost like if you were filming it, you'd have a shot of horses and then you'd all of a sudden zoom right into their hooves, like stamping in the earth, right? Getting ready for the charge. And then here's the key. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping over times and turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. So we're going to compress time. I've often observed when film directors talk about film, they talk about what their job is really is to compress time so that all the events of a movie can be observed in an hour. A playwright does the same thing, although some plays occur in real time. Shakespeare does not, but some do, many do. To compress time or to extend time to give it extra meaning, right? And that's kind of what he does in his plays, right? He extends time and he compresses time. And that's what storytelling is all about in a certain way. And he's just really laying it out. But it requires the cooperation of the audience for that to work. And turning the accomplishment of, yeah, for the which supply, admit me chorus to this history. Let me in, let me be your guide through this story. Who prologue like, and now we get back to the thing about how this chorus, how this prologue differs from, a standard neutral voice chorus. He says, I will prologue like, I will pray for your humble patience, pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. And that goes back to the very traditional standard appeal at the end of any prologue speech, which is, please enjoy the show. Okay, so that's my really rough first breakdown of it. There you go. Should we get to some questions?
You used this amazing phrase in a conversation we were having the other day, language as landscape. Can you talk more about that?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, when we look at the language of Shakespeare and we look at its, the expanded quality of it, right? And the poetic quality of it, and the use of so much rhetorical language inside it. What is all that about? Well, it's for a few reasons. One of them is that drama at this time was still breaking forth out of the art of poetry, which is words on a written page. That might be read aloud, but not in a dramatic context. And the other thing is, theater was a pretty simple art form in terms of its production values, right? Like, you didn't have big set pieces flying in. There wasn't a lot of, most of what evidence that we have about how these plays were produced was that they were produced very simply. So in that condition, the language helps set the scene. It helps describe where we are. It paints a picture of the world. And a well-written speech would create imagery in the minds of his audience. You got to remember that back then they were much less visually oriented. People didn't read, or if they did, they didn't read nearly as much as we do, and they didn't work, they didn't stare at screens all day long like we are, right? They were used to using their ears more, right? So you think about when someone tells you a story without any visuals, and what that does inside your head as you're taking it in, you're probably envisioning things as you go. That vision is going to be a little bit different for every person who hears that language, right? It's going to envision something slightly different. When I say, oh, for a muse of fire, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to create an image of what is a muse of fire, or you're going to go, what is a muse of fire? Hopefully it's the first one and not the second one. You're going to create that image. So that's what I mean by language as landscape. Language paints the pictures of where we are. In Hamlet, the first line is, who's there? Who's there?
It's a great beginning.
Yeah. So that tells us a couple of things. It says they can't see who's there. Well, why can't they see who's there? Because it's night. But the plays were performed in the daytime. So that's a great clue. That tells us something about where we are.
I love this idea of language as landscape, because for me it conjures an idea that there are all of these different features, and there's so many different kinds of features. There's the rhythm, there's the sounds, the music, the visual imagery, the ideas and the rhetorical structures, and it seems to me that thinking of language as landscape gives us an opportunity to inhabit it. And we are all going to inhabit it in our own ways, because we have our own processes, our own ways of encountering the world and encountering language. So I just love that idea.
Yeah,
let's look at a question.
Sure.
What is your process of tackling a speech as an actor as opposed to as a director?
Oh, well, yeah, they are slightly different, but I engage both tracks when I'm working on. So as an actor, my job is, like I said at the beginning, it's to figure out what's the purpose of the speech? What is the speaker trying to attain here, right? And what is the tone of it? And what are the different tactics I'm taking within each chunk of that speech in order to try and get the mark? Like, what's the speech for? But this is actors' work of any kind. The extra layer with Shakespeare is, how is the language specifically employed? How does what things are hidden inside this language, or what's inside that construction that's going to help me? I'm just trying to find here's one. So if you go down halfway down the speech, and let, oh, pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. Well, what I note when I say that is that the verb work is placed after the target noun, imaginary forces. That's not how English language works in contemporary society, right? Normally we would say, let us, ciphers to this great account, work on your imaginary forces. So as an actor, I'm going, well, why is that like that? Why is it placed like that? What does that do for me as a speaker? It shows me something about the status of the words, the importance of the words, and the word being placed at the end of the thought being the word that the writer wants me to leave the audience with at the end of that particular thought. The word work. Let us work on this. So you're doing that kind of thing when you're going through the speech. Now, as a director, I'm looking at the structure of it too, so that I can have a conversation with the actor. Because when you're given these long speeches, they're a little hard to swallow. It's kind of like someone has stuck an elephant on a plate and asked you to eat it. So I'm going to eat it. But it's going to take me a while. So as a director, I like to do some of this work too, so that I can have a conversation with the actor when they're ready to, bounce thoughts or questions or confusions that they have about the speech, so that I can have that conversation with them, so they're not left completely to their own devices. And then the other thing I'm doing with the speech is I'm looking at it in the greater context of the play and the construction of the play. Is what's its purpose in the greater structure? Well, a chorus is pretty clear. It's to set things up and set the tone so that the audience has something to hang on to as they come in the room with us. Right. So that's, yeah. So there's sort of two parts. I'm just wondering if I left anything out as an actor. I think that pretty much covers it. I have to know what I'm saying. If I don't know what I'm saying, the audience will know, because the great thing about theater is the audience sees everything. So they do, because we're standing out there and there's nothing, they see everything. You might be able to hide some things with some fancy costumes and some lights and stuff like that, but basically they see everything. If they see an actor doesn't know what they're saying, they're going to know. Might not consciously know, but they'll know something's up.
You get it on an almost instinctive level.
Yeah, you get it in an almost instinctive way, and it might take a few times of encountering that with an actor. But eventually, and when you feel like the actor doesn't know what they're saying, it's hard to invest in what they're saying. It's hard to engage with them. That's been my personal experience, and I gained that personal experience by acting on stage and not knowing what I was saying.
Is it hard to be both a director and an actor?
No, I think it's really great. I've had the great opportunity a couple of times to be actually in the show I was directing, which kind of it actually sent me on both paths at the same time on the same piece of work most recently was in the Bard production of Comedy of Errors in 2015, which was so much fun to work on and envision and carry out with that company. Amazing company of actors. So yeah, it's not hard. It's just well, yeah, it's hard. Yes, it's very, very hard. It's a joyful challenge.
Do you like one more than the other?
I like them both for different reasons. I get asked that quite a bit. I like them both for different reasons. I like the thing about directing is large bulk of the work is actually before rehearsal starts. It's the planning, it's the visioning, it's the collaboration with the designers, it's the casting process. It's all the prep work, right? And then you get into the part of rehearsal with the actors, and that's just a wonderful generative kind of process, trying to figure out all the pieces and how does we get this thing. As an actor, you don't have the same level of oversight. You're working within a company of peers, and you're all working together to try and help attain the director, the vision that the director has set for the piece, or the vision that you've collectively set. If you're working in that kind of company, not every play, not the vision of not every play has its final vision set by the director. Some processes are different, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so when you're just acting, it's great. Can you kind of dig into your own little bit and then throw it out there and see how other actors respond to it? And with the director, you're kind of looking at more from top down.
As a director, there's another question from an attendee. As a director, what have you found that actors find the most challenging about working on Shakespeare?
It's personalizing the language. It's making it seem like it's not Shakespeare talking. It's personalizing it to the point where that when you speak it, I can believe that it's coming from you. And that is the job of an actor, right? It's to make you forget that somebody who's not even in the room wrote it all down and gave it to other people to speak.
So how do you help actors with that, with Shakespeare? What do you do?
Well, there's different things you do. Oh gosh, what do I do? Well, I find a lot of it is actually overcome by repetition. Like the more you speak it, the more you can own it. It's kind of like it's like a pair of shoes that you buy from the store, and you put them on in the store, and they fit well, and fit good. And then you bring them home, you start wearing them, and there's like, they're a little tight, and my feet kind of hurt after a while. And the more you wear them, the more you kind of break them in, or you break yourself in to those shoes. So repetition is key. Finding different ways to say it. I'll often have an actor try and speak the text in their own language, in their own contemporary language. So, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. What does that mean? Well, how would you say that? I wish I had inspiration full of fire that would climb up to the highest peak of imagination, right? Just trying to find different ways to say it that make you feel that put you in a comfort zone, right? So that you can then you're trying to create a bed of familiarity that you can lay this language into so that it seems like it's yours. Let's see, what else?
We have a question about repetition.
Okay, sure.
So if you keep practicing your lines, do they get stuck in your head? Do you dream about the play?
Yeah, I do dream about the play every once in a while when I'm working on it. I'm more likely to dream about the play after the play is closed. Because
why do you think that is?
Well, because hindsight is 20/20, right? Like once something is over and you get a little distance from it, then you're able to look back and go, oh, why didn't I do it like that? So I do think about the play a lot. I mean, memory is really interesting. I played Hamlet, in 1995. So that's, how long ago was that? 25 years ago. I still know all the soliloquies. But don't ask me what I had for breakfast yesterday. So some of it does stay with you. Some of it has to do with how your memory changes over time. I think, I played King John in 2012, and I don't think I remember much of that script. So some of it has to do with how you relate to text, how your brain processes it when you're younger.
We have another question about memorizing.
Sure.
How long does it take you to memorize a sentence in Shakespeare?
Not very long. Not very long. Look, if I had to do this, if I have to work up an audition piece for Shakespeare, it'll take me a couple hours, maybe an hour. If I've read
another
it before.
Part of the question.
Yeah.
Do you practice the same thing every day?
Well, if I'm, that's a for many, many years, I used to read Shakespeare every day. Yeah, I would just keep complete work because I love Shakespeare. I think it's so cool. And I would just keep Shakespeare by my bed. I would just read like a couple of scenes a day.
You just dip in and out of it at random?
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, when I'm working on a play, of course, you are working on it every day in rehearsal, and you go home and you review things and you study it. Before rehearsal starts, you read it, you familiarize yourself with it. You're trying to get off book, you're trying to get it memorized as soon as possible. I mean, ideally, you like to have the play memorized even before you go into rehearsal, at least for me, because the less I'm looking at the page, the more I'm going to be able to look at the other actors in the room and take note of the scene that we're building.
It becomes more collaborative if you can actually really communicate with one another.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to note that in opera, for example, it's an industry standard. It's a requirement to know your music and to know everything ahead of time. It's not a real requirement in the theater, but except you have to know your lines by dress rehearsal. But it certainly helps when people are off book. Yeah, for sure. It just gets you down the road of what I talked about earlier, owning that material and making it your own. The longer you have it in your possession, the deeper that ownership becomes, and you can do more with it once you own it.
I remember hearing a scholar talk about the practices of the early modern schoolhouse and how they would have the students, and they use the term incorporate the poetry, which really meant memorize it, but an even better term in my book is learn it by heart. But I love that they talked about incorporating it. I love that, literally taking it into your body.
I had a real shift in how my memory works as I got older. I'm in my mid-50s now, right? So when I was young, I had a kind of, I wouldn't call it a photographic memory, but when I would look at the script and I'd be on stage, and if I'd kind of forget my line, the first thing that would happen is I would see an image of the page. So if you're looking at this document with "Oh, for a Muse of Fire" on it, that's what I would see. I would see the speech with the blue background and then the pink area with the black letters, and I would actually see it like I'd taken a photo of it with my phone. That doesn't happen so much anymore. It's different. Now I need to do different things to memorize. Repetition is key. Sometimes I'll record it and I'll listen to it. Sometimes I'll write it out longhand. Because your brain is programmed toward different types of learning, and we all have different types of learning that we're attracted to. If I'm just sitting and reading, I'm much less likely to learn it than if I'm on my feet moving around while I'm reading it. And that's because moving around allows you to incorporate it, like you said, maybe a little easier. So there's different tricks for memorization.
The other thing I find incredibly useful is actually expressing the thought, so that I'm not just like saying the words without any connection to the actual thought that I'm expressing.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
talking about. Yeah,
the
earlier
intention of what I want to say.
Yeah, and also trying to put it in your own words.
Mm-hmm.
I also find very helpful. If I can express this in my own language, then I can apply that meaning, that feeling that I have, and that intention that I feel back onto Shakespeare's language, and that will fill that language with the intention that I'm looking for.
Here's a question from an attendee. How do you help introduce actors to Shakespeare who have never spoken or acted verse or language like this before?
Yeah, I think you need to start really simply. I mean, I think you need to look at like a really small chunk. Like I wouldn't give somebody this speech, but I might give them the first 8 lines and say, let's talk through this and see what's happening here. You want to teach them a few technical things about the language. You want to talk to them about rhythm and meter. You know, the da-dum, 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 the iambic pentameter, the rhythm in which the plays are written. And if you want to know more about iambic pentameter, put it in the chat. Let's see if we can get to it in the next few minutes. We'll talk about tools of rhetoric a little bit, like why are those words flipped that way? Talk a little bit about Shakespeare's relationship to the audience, how drama differs then from how it does now, because there are some differences. Not that you need to play those differences, but it's always good to know where the stuff came from, right? What else would I talk about? And I would talk about, and I do this a lot when I'm working, especially when I'm working with younger actors. Well, not always younger actors. Sometimes we all go through it. Is the mythology that accompanies Shakespeare, right? Like a lot of people, they get cast as Hamlet or Cleopatra or Rosalind and As You Like It. They're gonna feel a kind of weird. They're gonna kind of feel the eyes of every actor who's ever played that part upon them. Feels a bit weird, but there's this mythology that goes along with it. And what you have to do with actors is help them see that there are as many Hamlets and Cleopatras and Rosalinds in the world as there are actors to play those parts, and that it's really you we want to see in the role, and that will make that particular role, that performance, unique. So it's reassuring actors that they have what it takes to do it, and that if they do it with their best own selves, that they will bring something special to the role.
And that's exactly what we delight in with Speech of the Week. And every single one of you out there, you get to make this language your own. What we want to hear is you. So here's a question for you, Scott, from another question from an attendee. Do you understand all the words of Shakespeare?
No. No, I mean, I understand everything that is in this speech. And I'm having all kinds of flashbacks because of doing the play so many years ago. But no, I'm consistently surprised by things I don't quite understand, or things that I thought I understood when I had previously performed them, but I realize now that I don't really know what I was talking about there, because your meaning, your understanding can deepen over time, right? And that's the hindsight thing that I was talking about earlier. It's like I've had several experiences where, like 5 years after I've done a show, I've woken up one morning and gone, oh, that's what that meant.
And this is where I really love the collaboration, right? Because sometimes it is really tricky. Sometimes it is really thorny. And by talking about it together, we can kind of, wrestle with it and tease it out and figure it out and help one another. We're running low on time.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
I don't know. Is there anything brief that you would like to say about iambic pentameter? Because we've had a couple
Oh,
of
sure.
requests
I mean,
from
it's
people
what
who have a hard time,
yeah, yeah.
or want to know how
So
important it is, what difference it makes.
Shakespeare is written largely in a metered language, da-dum, 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 right? So it's iambic pentameter because it is full of 5 2-foot beats, right? Like your rhythm of your heart, which goes ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. One of those ba-bumps is an I-A-M-B, right? So pentameter refers to 5 meter of 5 pentameter. Iambic pentameter is a kind of natural flow of the English language. So as a result, the poetic form that drama took at the time made use of iambic pentameter as a method or a means of communicating language. Now he has lots of characters. In Henry V, there are several who don't speak in iambic pentameter or who change how they speak. Henry V speaks in iambic pentameter when he's talking to the other, lords in the court, and when he's talking to the King of France. But when he's disguised as a soldier moving around the camp at night, and he's sitting around a campfire talking with the other soldiers, he does not speak, and he speaks in a more pedestrian rhythm.
Speaks in prose then, right?
Which we call prose, right? And there's other kinds of meters that occur in Shakespeare. There's septameter, which is often used for things like songs or magic spells. Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream has several speeches in pentameter, well, a couple anyway. And so does Oberon when he's casting spells on people. So a meter kind of is a way of highlighting language, or shaping it in a certain way to create a certain effect. I always feel like when I'm speaking in metered language that I'm all my faculties, my emotional faculties and my mental faculties are combined. They're in sync, and they're speaking at their utmost power. They're sort of to the best of their ability. Whereas when I'm speaking in prose, I'm speaking more from a lower place, a less conscious place, a more colloquial and relaxed place. So those are the basics that I work with.
Awesome. So Scott, for the final question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to apologize to everybody. I can't get every single question in. But for a final question, why do you like Shakespeare?
I just love the expansive quality of it. I first encountered it. I mean, I like it, a lot of people. I studied it in high school, and I was just bored to tears with it. I just didn't get it. And then when I encountered it in theater school, I just became fascinated with the structure of it and the expression of it and the rhythm of it and the imagery, which I found so evocative and powerful. And then you start to learn the plays a little more, and you see that the things he was writing about, family, trust, justice, love, honor, which is a word that we don't encounter very much, in our daily lives, all these things, these core lessons about the human experience are expressed so vividly and so beautifully through these plays. I just think it's really cool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experience with us tonight, Scott. We're incredibly grateful. And I want to just encourage everyone who's listening to delight in exploring the speech for yourselves and expressing it in your way. And please, if you're able, come to our working session next week. And if you're able and willing, record yourself doing the speech and share it with us. All the details are on the Speech of the Week page on our website. We adore seeing your work, and we want to celebrate it with you. Thank you again to everyone, and thank you, Scott. Until next time.
Thank you very much.